Welcome to a new episode of the Webz Insider. This year we decided that with 2022 about to end, we'd like to take a look at the top dark web trends for 2022. One of the biggest topics that still dominated the news over the past year is ransomware. And with us to speak just about that topic is Hagar Mogoling, a cyber analyst here at Webz.io, who has been going over the dark web in all the darkest corners of the dark web to find ransomware groups, activities, everything new. So Hagar, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here today.
So in your latest article for the dark web polls, the top ransomware trends on the dark web in 2022, you mentioned one of the most interesting trends you found, that you call the creation of professional ransomware industries. What do you mean by that, and how can we see it?
So if in the past we used to treat ransomware attack as a purely attack vector among many other ones, so in today's world, it should be treated as a professional industry with its own market and stakeholders. So if you're focusing on ransomware gangs, for example, which we can see many of those today, so they have a very interesting pattern that is very similar to legitimate companies' patterns in the market. And it's the division of different responsibilities between the members of the group. So in the gang, you can see members that are responsible for the development of the ransomware and for executing the attacks, and other members that are responsible, for example, for the negotiations with the victims. So it's very interesting to see how the operation is working together, and of course that it helps them to carry out large number of cyber attacks as well as more successful ones. Another thing that is interesting is the gangs need to market themselves so they can get more reputation and recognition, like any self-respecting brand. So to accomplish this, they usually maintain their own public channel on the deep or on the dark web, where they can distribute their messages and announcement, and also publicize their targets, including their internal information, and also to recruit people to the ranks. And some of them also conduct kind of PR campaigns in different hacking firms, which would embarrass a respectful PR team. And one of the most prominent and interesting examples we had this year was the Lockbit's offer to pay $1,000 to all those willing to get their logo tattoo. So it was insane. Because this campaign was so successful, the Lockbit team decided pretty quickly to stop this campaign. But it was amazing to see that. But besides that, there are other interesting patterns, of course, which indicates we have a ransomware industry here that is evolving, and all of them are covered in my last article for the dark web polls.
So from all the different ransomware trends you've seen over the past year, is there one specifically you think that is going to continue in 2023?
Yeah, of course. It mainly pertains to that developing market I was mentioning, which includes a wide range of stakeholders. So one of the most prominent things that have developed this year and is expected to grow even more next year is the whole documentation of ransomware builder softwares, which can be easily found on the dark web. And the point here is that it's allowing groups of people with little experience in ransomware to build and create their own destructive Trojans in order to launch cyber attacks, which is very, very risky, of course. And although these Trojans do not fall into the traditional ransomware category, they're very similar to them in terms of their functionality. And as they continuously develop, they're expected to be more similar to ransomware as we know today. But however, for those who worry, just in case that using a ransomware builder is too complicated for some, there is already another market developing around the trade of custom ransomware and even on-demand ransomware services for those who are looking for the easiest way.
Oh, wow. So we can all start using ransomware.
Yeah.
Great.
But this is just one of the biggest trends we're seeing moving into 2023. So we will continue use our dark web data feeds to closely monitor and follow ransomware discussions, and also sites and channels belonging to ransomware groups and new emerging tools and trends, which all of them can provide in-depth intelligence every company needs today.
Another big dark web trend over the past year is relating to data leaks. So with us today is Yuval Shibi, a cyber analyst here at Webz.io, who has written and explored a lot around data leaks on the dark web and written about it recently. So welcome, Yuval.
Thanks, great to be here.
Thanks. So let's dive in. And in your article, you wrote about the top industries that were targeted by data leaks this past year. Some of them were really surprising and a bit unnerving, to be honest. What can you tell us about it?
So using our data feed on a daily basis really gets us the option of getting a broader image of what happens every day and every month and every period of time on the dark web. And it helps us indicate and analyze different phenomena that come and go. So during the past year, we certainly saw specific industries being targeted and attacked over and over again. The first and I think the major of the attacks that we saw this year had to do with the healthcare industry, and that was without a doubt among the most affected industries this year, and obviously had to do with COVID. Hospitals were attacked, private practices were attacked, malwares and thousands of compromised hospital-related entities were breached, both of staff and of patients themselves. And we could have seen either credentials of the users or their physical addresses or physical and health conditions. So that was a big thing ever since COVID started and through this year too. And another industry that was affected and attacked much this year was the gov industry. So it was very easy to see it with all that had to do with the Russian-Ukraine war. Tons of Russian-related breaches were posted by Ukrainian hackers and the other way around. And departments of ministry offices were both users and internal information that was stolen was posted. And another governmental office that was well attacked this year was the Indonesian one, from which we saw tons and tons of breaches that didn't have to do specifically with a specific office or ministry, but we saw both the police and the government ministries being breached over and over again. Another example to that is the Shanghai, the Chinese police that was breached. Yeah, so they've been very active through over these industries.
So another trend you mentioned in your article is the standardization of data leak posts. What do you mean by that, and how can we see it?
So that's actually really interesting to me as an analyst. Over months, we see behaviors of hackers change. And at this specific case, we're talking about the demands of what they want to both provide and consume as hackers when it comes to data that was leaked, breached from a platform and then leaked. So the whole process, the whole setting of data breaches has become more and more professional, as it has also become more and more common. And both sides, the active hackers who provide the stolen data after breaching some kind of platform or server, and the consumers, the hackers who buy those traded compromised fields, they both have learned to demand and provide better data in its quality, in its volume, the amount of users that are breached, and how to tell all that, how to show the data is valuable. So for an example, if I were a hacker these days, I would know I need to show what is the product or the server or the brand or the platform I breached, and what is the leaked data, what compromised fields do I have in my file, Is it domains? Is it usernames? Is it passwords? Is it physical addresses, IPs, phone numbers? What is it? And then the other hackers know how valuable it is to them, and they're willing more to pay or not pay their money for it. And moreover, the admins of these websites, of these hacking forums, have become, they pay a lot of attention to these posts. So if a hacker reposts or posts lies or scams or steals data from another stolen data post and reposts those, they see that and they ban those users, and they delete, they remove those posts, and they tell exactly what the reasons for all those were. So either it's a repost or it's a scam or whatever, and then other hackers learn from that and know not to repeat that. And that way it's easier both for them and for us to tell when the data is valuable and how valuable it is, what compromise fields we have in each and every file. Now, another thing is in Webz, those compromise fields that were breached, if it's a domain or a phone number or an SSN or credit card, we recognize those and we make them searchable independently of the original text search on the Cyber API. So we exclude them from the post, and then they're searchable alone. And that makes it very easy for analysts such as myself to search valuable posts from hacking forums, because obviously when those show in text, I know there was data breached and traded. Yep, that's more or less it.
That's fascinating. So I suppose you go more in depth into those trends in your article.
Yeah, I sure do. And whoever's eager to learn more about that, I recommend reading my last item.
So although alternative social media isn't part of the dark web, it's still a very important resource when it comes to monitoring illicit and extremist content. With us today is Avishai Levich, our senior cyber analyst here at Webz.io, who's written and researched a lot about the topic of unregulated platforms. Avishai, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
So I'd like to dive in and talk for a second about a recent article you wrote about the top illicit content on alternative social media, specifically about the top types of illicit content. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, so before I dive into the topics, I want to first mention the main difference between mainstream social media, which are, for example, Twitter and Reddit, maybe TikTok even, to alternative social media. So alternative social media has very similar functions to mainstream social media, very super similar sites, but the main difference is the type of content they allow. Users can actually write whatever they want over at alternative social media. They don't have any content restrictions. They don't really get blocked. This is, of course, different from mainstream social media, which they really enforce and regulate their sites by the terms and conditions. So yeah, so this fact is actually leading to alternative social sites to have a lot of extremist and illicit content in them. And I'm going to go through some main topics that we see are really crucial for monitoring. So the first one is threats to executives and companies. Threat to executives can be life threats. By the way, not only executives and any VIP, it can be an even political entity. We see a lot of life threats and violent threats against them. We can even see doxing, which is a form of cyberbullying, leaking a PII of someone, personal identifiable information. And threats to brands. This can be radical trends against the company, or maybe anti-campaign. This can even be life threats, or I don't know, physical threats to its employees or physical assets. So this is very important to track for brand protection purposes use case. And the second topic I'm going to address is misinformation. Misinformation it's pretty general, but this is referring to conspiracy theories, fake news. All of you know what it is. So this can, of course, be escalated really quickly when given the right crowd. We have seen in the past mass shooting caused over conspiracy theories. So these are very, very important to track and make sure they don't escalate to real life. And the third, I want to say topic, but it's pretty wide and general, is extremism. This basically means any radical extreme content we can find over there. This can be an organization or a movement or a group or a page or even some single users who follow an extreme trend. And by saying extreme, I mean, for example, this can be neo-Nazi or white supremacy groups or radical far right, and all sorts of really users and groups we can find there.
So one of the things you mentioned as well is the process you saw in the way that Islamic radical groups operated online and alternative social media and the future of it. What can you tell us about it?
Okay, so first let's overview quickly what happened with Islamic radical groups. We actually saw them first on mainstream social media, where they got banned and restricted, and then they moved to operate on underground group and closed groups. And for example, we can see some groups of Islamic terror at Telegram chat applications. So we actually anticipate that in the future, in the far future, we'll actually see that some regulations might appear on alternative social media, and next to those regulations, and there might be really intensive monitoring of them, because people will understand the value of intelligence to life threats that can be found over there. And so we believe they will eventually move their activity to close underground groups such as Islamic terror. They will hide from the rest of the world. But this is in the distant future. In the near future, we actually anticipate this phenomenon to grow. As we could see in the latest news, a lot of users left Twitter for Mastodon, and Mastodon was an alternative social media that we've been keeping track of for years. It has no content limitations. So for now, this phenomenon is only growing, but in the future, we anticipate it will shift. This was just a few minutes on this topic. You can, of course, click below and read my full article.